All right, we are ready for another session of Profit Like It's Hot, our summer webinar series. Who here wants more profit, right? Raise your hand, type profit in the webinar chat. If you guys have missed any sessions, we do put them out, the recording, so as long as you're registered, we will send you the recording, and then usually in a week or two we will also post them up on our YouTube channel. So if you're not subscribed or following our YouTube channel, go subscribe to there because you will get notified whenever we throw up new videos over there. So if you've missed previous sessions, I think this is session number 6 or so. Again, you can go back and watch those previous ones. We've covered peptides, we've covered some bookkeeping, lots of really great topics. So today we are going to be talking about one of my favorite topics, which is massive profits from workers' compensation. Workers' compensation is a lot like other niches in pharmacy. There's, it's almost like a roller coaster ride, right? There's, super popular times and it becomes out of popular. Back in the 80s and 90s, workers' comp was like all the rage. And then of course, as the PBMs started taking over, in 2010s, and reimbursements got slashed. We know the PBMs are still making their money, right? But, our reimbursements got slashed, kind of got out of favor. But I started to learn, I basically self-discovered, kind of accidentally fell into the benefits of direct billing for your workers' compensation. So that is what I'm going to be teaching you about today. And Streamcare is my favorite company for direct billing for workers' comp. Certainly it's not the only one out there, but I feel like they're one of the best. They have some of the best team, and they're also the most aggressive, because you will find why there's so much profit in workers' comp. I'm gonna explain that to you. And the PBMs that process for workers' compensation, you'll see how much money they're making. And so when you try to direct bill, especially if you're not in a state that you have super strong rights to direct bill, those PBMs are going to fight to keep that profit because they want it. So I'm going to be telling you everything you need to know about how to increase your profitability for workers' comps. Truthfully, this is one of the very first things that I do in a pharmacy. So if you ever want to know, if Lisa buys a pharmacy, what would she do? Adding Streamcare, adding direct billing workers' comp is one of the very first things. The very first thing I do is a thank you card program. After that, it's getting signed up with Streamcare and getting our workers' compensation prescriptions through there. So let's dive in. Really quick, this is not a lecture. Feel free to post any questions. You can just stick them in the chat, and I will go through them. If I see them in the moment, I will answer for you. Arizona, yes, Arizona's good. Most states now are good. Some are stronger than others. There's certainly a gradient of green, if you will. There's super dark green where it's you have legal inalienable rights to direct bill. And then there's light green where it's it's okay to bill, but they aren't legally required to let you, so there's shades of green there. But yes, Arizona is one of them. So if you don't know me, howdy, I am Dr. Lisa Faast. I own 2 independent pharmacies currently. I've owned as many as 7, I think, at one time. My very first pharmacy, I started from scratch. So I've done the startup, I've done the purchase, I've done the selling, I've done everything about wrong or right in pharmacy. You could probably ask me about it. Chances are I've done it. I run DiversifyRx, which is my company that we're putting this on. We also put on the Pharmacy Profit Summit, which is our annual, lovely, completely different than other conference industries. The next one's in March. And here's all my contact information. Feel free to contact me or any questions. All right, so those of you that are Pharmacy Badass University members, this is your Pharmacy Profit Matrix. So this is our content framework inside our membership. So you will find this recording and all resources for direct bill workers' comp right there at the top, first row, direct bill workers' comp. Like I said, it's one of the first things that I do. This is the plan. So if you're not a member, you don't have access to this, but those of you that are members, all of the resources are going to be there. So did you know, and I'm going to give you all a chance to answer, so I'd love to see you guys answer. Did you guys know that workers' compensation reimbursement rates are set by the state legislature? Is that something you were aware of? a bunch of elected officials gathered in a room someday, and they decide what workers' compensation reimbursement rates are going to be for your state. Many people don't realize that. We're so used to pharmacies, the PBMs just making stuff up. But the answer is yes, your workers' compensation reimbursement rates are set at the state level, right? So there isn't a way for a workers' compensation prescription to be paid, $15 or $50 or $80 or $500. The state or the insurer, whoever, depending on how the workers' compensation program is ran, pays the same rate. They don't have a choice. It's legislated. All right. So the amount of reimbursement for a prescription is the same. Now you're going to find out how that reimbursement gets down to you as the pharmacy, right? All right. Also, did you know that many of the state level rates are usually set around full AWP? There's actually a few states that are AWP plus, some are AWP minus, and if they are AWP minus, it's usually like minus 5% or minus 10%. Those of you, if you aren't familiar with pharmacy billing, AWPs are a completely made up number. Doesn't really have anything to do with the cost of the drug. So your generics like a lisinopril, or like for workers' compensation, like a baclofen or something like that, those AWPs can be $500-$600, but the cost of the drug is, $5. And so you get paid based on what the AWP is, not on what the drug costs you. And so this is what creates a spread that makes pharmacy filling for workers' compensation can make it profitable if you do it right, which right means without the PBM, because the PBMs will steal all of it. All right, so when you bill a workers' compensation prescription through a PBM, you are letting go of those generous rates. So if your state legislature pays full AWP for a drug, but you bill it to a PBM instead, and that PBM contract is AWP minus 87%, then you are willingly giving up that 87% to the PBM. So again, that's why direct billing is so critical and can make such a difference for workers' compensation. We all know PBMs have really, really low reimbursement rates, right? And so this is a way to bypass the PBM and get there. So the PBM gets to bill for the full AWP. Again, the state legislature is the one who sets the price, not the PBM, not the pharmacy, not the drug company. Well, I guess by AWP they might, but the legislature sets the price, right? So the PBM gets to bill for the full AWP. If you're using a PBM to bill for a workers' comp and that contract rate is AWP minus 87%, then they only have to pay you the contract rate. Doesn't matter what they billed the state or what they got paid through the state. So they only pay you the AWP minus 87%. So they're paying you pennies and they're keeping all the dollars, right? So that's why it's so critical to bypass the PBM, right? So the traditional approach is pharmacy bills the PBM does their thing on the back end. The PBM adjudicates the claim to the pharmacy, and you get whatever the PBM decides to pay you. The other approach is, again, to bypass that PBM, to skip the PBM, and this is what's called direct billing. So you bill the actual insured directly, not a PBM. So you're billing your state adjuster, you're billing a private adjuster, those kinds of things. So you bypass the PBM and you bill the insured directly. All right. So the traditional way is you bill the PBM. The direct billing advantage that Streamcare helps do for you is you bypass the PBM. Question is, how do you find out if your state pays AWP? It's posted. Google is your friend. You can probably just Google it. You can also contact Streamcare, and they'll let you know what your state rates are. But most are just AWP. There's a few that are AWP plus. There's a few that are AWP minus. Even the ones that are minus, I think the last time I checked, the largest one was like minus 7.5% or something. So it was still far better than any PBM contract. Okay, so the Streamcare advantage. So Streamcare does all the work for you. Now, I will tell you, as much as I love Streamcare, you don't have to use Streamcare. You can go do this yourself. Like I said, I kind of accidentally stumbled into this when I was running my very first pharmacy in California. And California is not one of the like dark green states for direct billing. It's like light green, where you can direct bill, but it's kind of up to the adjuster. If they want to pay you or if they want to be lazy and force you to go through a PBM. But I was calling around trying to get information for a workers' comp prescription. I was actually trying to get the information for the PBM. I got the adjuster on the phone and they're like, "Oh, send me the bill." And I was like, "Send you the bill?" They're like, "Yeah, here's my mailing address. Send me the bill." I was like, "That's weird." So I printed out, the report from my printer or my computer. And because it wasn't billed to any PBM, it was like the default cash pricing, which was, AWP plus, all those things that we have built into our PMS system. And so I sent this bill off, like not even quite knowing what I was doing. And a couple, weeks later, I get a check in the mail for like way more than I thought. I was like, what in the world? So I literally like accidentally stumbled into this. What did I do after that? All our other workers' comp patients, I tried to do the same thing. Nowhere was I 100% successful. Many, many adjusters were lazy and just like, you have to bill Matrix or you have to bill Temesis. But I would find some good ones. I would find someone that'd be, and sometimes I would just start asking for, advisors, or I would just start asking for because I started to learn that the state adjusters, they all had the same address, but just a different mailbox number. So I figured out that I could just call and be like, "What's the mailbox number for, Jesse Jones?" And they'd be like, "Oh, that's mailbox 215. And so then I would just start sending bills to Jesse Jones and mailbox 215, and I would get paid. Because that's honestly what the PBM does in this case. So the insurer, the workers' comp insurer, they have to process all of the claims. It's all manual at some point. Now it's digital, but it's like there's humans involved. And so anyways, that's how I kind of discovered this all on my own. So when you do that, when you bypass the PBM, that 87% or whatever the crappy PBM contract is, you get to keep all that, right? Because you eliminate the spread pricing from the PBM. So direct billing is feasible in most states, right? I have a thing on here where some states that are not good. I think it's Ohio and New York. It's like the heavy like union legislative, like where it's like really super things, but I have a note in here. So you're increasing the amount that you get paid. So, and I'll show you some example pricing, but so the payer, they pay the same amount because it's set at the state level. But when you direct pay or direct bill, you're getting paid the total amount that you should, instead of, the PBM keeping 87% of it. So you're not increasing the amount that the insurers pays. You're not inflating costs or anything like that. You're just keeping more of the money instead of letting the PBM take it to you. So there's no patient impact. Obviously, workers' comp, there's no copays, anything like that. The patient isn't damaged or harmed in any way. The insurer isn't harmed in any way because, again, they pay the same amount because it's set at the state level, no matter who bills. So there's zero impact to your patients at all. All right, let me see here. There's a question that came through. So Ohio, yeah, Ohio is one of the ones that it's because of the heavy labor laws and whatnot, they heavily favor, they don't favor your individual right as a pharmacy to direct bill. So I think in their legislature, like they have the state contracts with the PBMs. Ohio has all of their state contracts, I think, with Caremark for anything government related. So the government basically forces you to use that program in Ohio. Don't quote me word for word, but that's what I think I remember that being. So, all right, here is some examples, right? You're like, all right, how much money are we talking about here, Lisa, right? So these are some real numbers, okay? Obviously the from is whatever, insurance the patient was using, the PBM, whether it was Matrix or Temesis or whatnot. So that is the PBM, the work comp PBM. And the to price is the direct bill price. And this money is after Streamcare's fee. So Streamcare takes a percentage of the money that you collect. So if you don't collect any money, if they try to bill a claim for you and it's denied or something like that, you don't pay Streamcare. So they only get paid on claims that actually get paid. So this 2 is after Streamcare's percentage, because that's not money that you get anyway. So examples: tizanidine, muscle relaxer, lots of people on workers' comp get this, goes from $857 to $95.24. So over 10 times, 12 times difference. Gabapentin, another, from $10 to $190. Oops, my bad. Oh, there we go. So here's just some examples. So again, it's not insignificant. It is a big difference. And if you can imagine just having 3 or 4 workers' comp patients, they all take 2 or 3 medications, all of a sudden you've got $1,000, $1,500 in profit from those patients when, before you were making, a few dollars from those patients. So, and obviously the lower cost you get. So if you buy from, secondary wholesalers like, PrimeRx Market or those kinds of things, obviously you can decrease your cost of goods even more. So here's just some examples. All right. So the impact is significant. Basically, when you bill through a PBM, you're giving them 90% of your profit instead of keeping it for yourself. So that is the ultimate difference here. So how do we start this, right? So you get signed up with Streamcare. You can actually go live with Streamcare in a day. It is not complicated. Their team will train you, help you set up all in your PMS, everything that you need to do. So that part's easy. You can, I'll give you the links and stuff for Streamcare, but you can literally get signed up for them and be ready to go in 24 hours. How do you actually start this? So obviously I'm all about implementation and actually doing things. So I'm going to take you through how I do it in my pharmacy. So first thing we do is I run some reports for some common work comp bins. Now, obviously these bins do lots of other prescriptions, right? So for example, the 003858 is Express Scripts. There's tons of Express Script plans that have nothing to do with workers' comp. However, when I run a report for those bins, I ask for the report for the groups. And many times in the groups, you can easily tell which ones are work comp. It'll either have like WC in there, it'll have like a lot of times little acronyms that make it clear that like that group number is a work comp group number. So then I run report for patients with the group number, and I end up finding out which of my patients are my work comp patients that are currently coming to my pharmacy. And I get those moved over to Streamcare. So the next time they fill it, we fill it through our Streamcare process instead of filling it through the PBM process. And so that's the first step we do. Now, you might have 1 patient or you might have 20 patients, right? Like, everybody's going to have a different amount. Sometimes worker comp patients stay on workers' comp for a long time. My most profitable patient ever on workers' comp, his name was David. And he had a crazy injury. I mean, obviously, these people are injured before they come to you, which is, tragic story. But he had fallen off like some scaffolding. And because of that, the damage, he lost his pancreas. He got like damaged, like his pituitary. He had some like weird internal injuries. And so he basically became like a diabetic and needed hormones, all this stuff basically overnight. He was on, probably like 15 medications. It was nuts. We did his compounded testosterone. We did like some other things, but all of those were direct billed. He was my most profitable patient. And he knew it. We treated him special. We never wanted David to go anywhere else, but, so he's on workers' comp for life. He had a lifetime settlement. He was never going to not need those. You can't replace your pancreas, and those kinds of things. So, he was on it for life. And then others, 10 days of, ibuprofen or something, and that's it. So, there's obviously a whole gambit of types of workers' comp patients, but start with these ones. Your patients will notice no different, no difference in service. They'll still pay $0, all that kind of stuff. But that's where I would start with is your own patients first, get them moved over. Then you can start to focus on like growing and getting like new prescriptions. Many of you have heard me talk about marketing a whole lot. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. For workers' comp, normally for marketing, you have two audiences. You have patients and you have, or potential patients, and you have providers or prescribers. Workers' comp, you have three audiences. So you have your patients, you have your providers, and you have employers. So employers can be another good source for, referrals for workers' comp. So workers' comp is a little bit different. You market a little bit different. So I'm going to go through each of these audiences and just kind of give you some tips for, marketing to these audiences and kind of what they're looking for. So patients are not looking for workers' comp before they need it. That's an important thing. So if you're, marketing and advertising NAD or, weight loss medication or vitamins or something like that, you can convince somebody that they need it, even though they weren't looking for it, right? Like that's how a lot of marketing is. It's like, hey, look at this drug. It can, make you skinny and have lots of energy. And they're like, oh, yes, I want that. With workers' comp, it's completely different. Nobody's like, oh, yeah, that sounds like a really good workers' comp program. I think I'm going to go get injured so I can do that. Like, no, it doesn't work that way. So nobody's looking for workers' comp until you need it, at least on the patient side. So when you're marketing for workers' comp, you need to be super consistent because you never know when that person who's reading your email or looking at your social media, when they're going to get injured or when they're going to need it, or somebody in their family or friend gets injured. And so constantly being in front of them is really the key to success if you're marketing to patients for workers' comp. Social media, in-store signage, those kinds of things where, the moment they need it, you become top of mind. They think of you. And that's the most important thing. Is that consistency. All right. You call out the current people. The other kind of low-hanging fruit in your community is probably you're not the only pharmacy in town, right? For most of you. Other pharmacies are filling workers' work comp prescriptions too. They might not be direct billing them. They might be making little, whatever. But your community as a whole has current workers' comp patients in there. I would say most of you, especially if you're listening to this webinar, you're probably one of the better pharmacies in your town. There's probably additional services, whether it's free delivery, just people who are friendly and actually like helping, where you can attract those people to transfer their prescriptions to you. So that's one of the first easiest ways after you do your current patients, when you want to start growing your marketing, is to call out and go after the people that are already on workers' comp and get them to transfer into your pharmacy. Highlight the benefits that you offer over the other pharmacy that they might be doing. Yes, we will send out the recording to everyone. All right, let's talk about prescribers now. So prescribers want it easy, right? Like they don't want to be bugged. They don't want a bunch of people calling, asking a bunch of questions. They want to work with pharmacies that know workers' comp. They know the process. They make it easy for them and easy for their patients. Workers' comp, especially at the prescriber level, it's volume, right? Like they try to get as many patients in, those are some of the busiest offices. So they want it easy. They don't want to be bothered. They don't want a bunch of phone calls. So that's the most important thing. If you're marketing to prescribers, you want to let them know, hey, we know what the heck we're doing. We're going to make it easy for you. We're going to make it easy for your patients. Send them to us, right? Urgent care and emergency rooms are fantastic for new workers' comp prescriptions. Most people, when they're injured at work, and obviously if it results in a prescription, they're going to have to see the doctor. And it's not one of those things that you wait a week to see your regular doctor. You usually go to an urgent care or emergency room. So those are the best places to get brand new patients that are new to workers' comp, is in those types of places. For getting access to people who are seeing current workers' comp patients, those kinds of things, is occupational health, physical therapists. I have found to be the best resource for current patients, so you can try to get them to transfer and earn their business from them. So those are the types of doctors best to go after. All right, so employers. Let's talk about employers, because that's kind of like a whole new thing. It's very similar. So those of you that do vaccine clinics, you might be more, familiar with reaching out to other local employers. But so what employers want is they want to meet their obligations to their employees in terms of compliance and safety. They also want good care for their employees, right? An employee down, even if it's, injured, is an employee down. Like, they want their employees to get better. They want them to get back to work. And if they aren't at work, they want them to get the best care. So, those are the angles that you can come to from an employer perspective. So you can have flyers or cards or other kinds of materials at the employers, whether it's a break lounge and HR, whatnot, asked to become a part of the injury packet. And the injury packet is like what I call it, but it's when an employee gets injured at work, the employer legally has to give them certain types of documents, and it varies by state, but there's usually always some sort of legal obligation that they have to give to them. So ask to be included in that, right? Like, get your flyers, get your cards, brochures, whatever, ask to become a part of that packet. So the moment those people are injured, they're given your information directly from the employer. You can also help with safety education. I did this for a lot of employers that I worked with closely in my first pharmacy. I would help them with safety posters. I would help them with, they would do like monthly emails to employees or whatnot, and I would write safety things. Sometimes it was part of the season, talking about the effects of, operating heavy machinery while taking medications, all those different kinds of things. But there's usually some safety obligations. It depends on the type of company and the work they do. So you can help with that, right? Like, you're an expert in medicine and lots of different things. And so that can be a really value add that you can bring to that employer. And in return, they put your information in front of their employees. All right. Other things, first aid kits, and first aid stations and things like that. You can order a lot of those from your wholesalers or whatnot, but just some other ideas of how you can offer value to local. So, work comp marketing materials. Now, I'm going to go there and show you some examples of different kinds of materials for workers' comp. Those of you that are Pharmacy Badass University members, these are all inside the membership. So all levels of membership, you get these. So these are ready to go for y'all. Obviously, if you're an essentials or up, and we can customize it for you. So you can just put in that custom request, or you can just download the template and make the edits yourself. So flyers, right? The full size flyers. These are good to pass out to patients, to have at the pharmacy. I generally do not use flyers at provider offices. Flyers are great for employers. But at provider offices, doctors, they're too big, they're too loose, they take up too much space. It just tends to not be a great fit for providers, but for employers, these are great. They get posted up on the board. They can be put in people's folders and stuff that they get when they're injured. So I find that flyers are really good for employers, or having inside your pharmacy to market to your current patients. All right, next up is business cards. Business cards are fantastic at urgent cares and emergency rooms. This is what I have in our urgent cares for my pharmacy. So we print them on this bright yellow, and we get those little acrylic business card holders. And when you do that, here's a pro tip. Put a sticker on the back of that acrylic thing that has like your pharmacy name and phone number, because when they run out of business cards, they forget like who had them there. And so they don't know who to call for more business cards. So I've learned to put a sticker on the back that has like, hey, for more cards, give us a call. Pro tip there. So these are great. The bright yellow is catchy. People notice it. And so this is great, right, to have, by the check-in, where people sign in, those kinds of things. This has worked really, really well for urgent care, emergency room, doctors, kinds of places. Bag stuffers. I do love me some bag stuffers. If you've listened to me at all, bag stuffers are fantastic. Now, usually a bag stuffer is like, inside a prescription bag or on the outside of a prescription bag. You can also use bag stuffers to give to employers, basically just miniature flyers. So that works really well there. I've also have done these inside providers' offices or the occupational health, where almost every patient they're seeing is workers' comp. And so you can have them out on the table, and they're easy to grab, and they're smaller because they're, once they're cut, it's a quarter page a paper instead of a full size paper. So so get creative with the bag stuffers. Just because they're called bag stuffers doesn't mean they only have to go out with the bag. But these have done really well, placed in areas like in physical therapy, you know, up by the office or over by the magazines or stuff like that. Sometimes they have like little cork boards or whatnot. And so this works really well for those types of areas too. It doesn't have to just go in a bag, but even though we call them bag stuffers. Social media, right? So social media, you know, just posting frequently. You know, you don't necessarily have to post daily on workers' comp. You know, I think we have it set up in our automated system. So if you're an unlimited member up, we do your social media for you. I think we have it set up where it's like 3 times a week for workers' comp, but we have all the templates for all of the members, so you can go in there and grab these. I think we have 45 days worth, so you have variety of those kinds of things. But again, it's that consistency. People aren't paying attention to workers' comp until they need workers' comp. So you could probably post the same image every 3 days and nobody's going to notice until they need it, and then that's when they'll notice it. So we've got social media templates so that you can post on your social media. And again, I don't think it's necessarily has to be a daily thing, unless you're one of those pharmacies where that's all you do is, you know, work comp or personal injury. Certainly has a couple of those, but otherwise, I think 3 days a week or so is good for posting on social media for workers' comp. Don't forget about your LinkedIn, right? Like, and I know many of you do not have LinkedIn because I go looking for you on there, but you're missing out because that's where providers are. That's where physical therapists are. That's where a lot of people that can be good channel partners for you live. So it's not just about Facebook. Facebook is great for patients, but LinkedIn is fantastic for connecting with those other professionals, whether they're a provider or just a fellow healthcare professional on LinkedIn. So don't forget, post them on LinkedIn as well. All right. So if you want to get started with Streamcare, at least learn more about it. Again, there's you don't pay Streamcare anything unless they actually bill a prescription and collect money for you. So there's no cost to sign up, no cost for submitting claims, anything like that. Once they get a paid claim, then they get paid. So those of you that, you know, have your phone, you can scan this, or you can go to this link, which is just diversifierx.com/go-streamcare. There's a quick little form. I think there's 4 or 5 questions on there. That'll go directly to the Streamcare team. That is the best way to contact Streamcare team. I will share Lloyd's phone number, but you know how it is when you start getting phone calls from a bunch of random, you know, area codes. You let them go to voicemail, and then you have to listen to the voicemail and call back, you know, those kinds of things. So the absolute best way to get, you know, information right away to hear from Streamcare is through either scanning the QR code or going to this link and then completing that short little questionnaire, and then it'll send it right to the team. And California and Ohio are the 2 states that are, you know, I consider those red, even though I actually did my own in California. And certainly, you could go. It's just the percentage of approved claims to denied claims is very heavily towards the denied claims. So, but every other state is some shade of green. Again, some are super dark where there's actually like legislative laws that if you direct bill, they have to pay you. Like there's some awesome states like that. And then, all the way to the other side where it's like, well, they allow you, but it's kind of up to the adjuster. If they're having a bad day, like they don't have to pay you, you know, there's those kinds of situations. So there's a whole gambit there. All right. If you don't have your ticket to the Pharmacy Profit Summit, here is your reminder. Prices go up shortly. We are having a bang, and we're going to start announcing speakers super soon. We have an amazing session on AI and operations. We've got a professional listener that is going to teach you how to, the topic of his is like, have better sex, save the world, improve your profits, like, you know, all in one day kind of thing. Like it's better. It's phenomenal. So we're going to be having some amazing speakers. So the speakers are going to be coming out soon. So grab your ticket before prices go up. Cause you know, I don't want you to pay more. You don't want to pay more. I don't want to pay the Hilton more. So just, you know, purchase now. All right. This is Lloyd's contact information. But again, phone number is the least best option because He'll have to wait till you leave a voicemail, and then he'll check the voicemail, and then he'll try to call you back, and then you probably won't answer because it's a random, area code. So the best way is to go to that website, diversifyrx.com/go-streamcare, and that's the best way to get started. Again, no charge to get signed up, to get trained, any of that. You only pay once they're successful in collecting. All right. Anybody have any Q or A, questions or answers? Well, chances are I probably have the answer and you have the question, but we'll go with it. Let's see. I just want to make sure I didn't miss any in the chat. Okay, did not miss any. Anybody have any Q&A? Feel free to either stick it in the chat or stick it in the Q&A, and I am happy to answer. Here, Kate, I will put it on here. There you go. I'll leave it on this one. Kieran, I have no idea what those numbers mean. Oh, typo. Okay. Or you could tell me what you wanted to send. Yes, recording will go out to everybody. For pharmacy groups with more than one location, do you recommend billing work claims out of the cash-only pharmacy, no PBM contract, so you avoid the PBM pushback? Yes, if you have that opportunity, where one of your locations or something does not have any PBM contracts, then you're not forced to use Timesys or Matrix because you have no contract with them. So so yes, Joseph, if you have that opportunity, that is the best way to go. Absolutely. We're a new pharmacy in California. So California, again, is one of those states where it's you have absolutely no legal protection in any way, shape, or form to direct bill. But as my story goes, I started direct billing and I was in California, and it just kind of happened by accident. So if you get workers' comp claims, the phraseology that I learned to use in California was to find out who the adjuster was, find out the mailing address, and you submit the bill. So an itemized bill. So they need obviously the drug, the NDC, all that kind of stuff. You need your tax ID on there. You need your remittance address on there, and any who the billing contact person is. And I just started mailing them out, and I got paid. But in California, the adjuster can force you to use a PBM. So that is. In terms of how green certain states are, I don't have a lot of those memorized. I know Louisiana is the #1 state for workers' comp. But I would just go through, fill out the information for Streamcare, and Lloyd or his team of lovely ladies, they'll be able to let you know like how your state is. But all of them are doable except for California and Ohio. And then the thing that I love about Streamcare is there's several direct billing services out there. Certainly Streamcare is not the only one, but the other direct billing services, when they get a denial, they just kind of like, okay, hands off, you got to bill the PBM. Where Streamcare will actually fight for you. So they do know the laws in each of the states. And if there's any legislative or any kind of precedents or something, they can actually help draft letters and things like that, in terms of like, hey, no, we have a right to direct bill according to, this, whatever. So they will actually be aggressive in going after those claims. Streamcare throws their hands up. That means like, that adjuster just, was not good. New York is highly dependent on who their employer is. If they are a union employee, then the unions all have PBM contracts and they force you to use those. But if you're not a union, then those are open. So it's very dependent on who the employer is in New York. I do know that. So how to start workers' comp? Same kind of thing that I told you about. Social media, talking to those providers, those occupational health, physical therapy, marketing at urgent cares, emergency rooms. The things that I covered earlier is how you start to generate those. So start posting on social media, LinkedIn, reach out to the places where injured workers. So, if you were injured at work, where would you go? If an employee, fell off the curb and, broke their ankle, where would they go? So where's the local hospital? Where's the urgent care? All those kinds of things. So there. Do you need a contract in the insurance company? No, Streamcare. So that's why I recommend Streamcare. Streamcare is who you would go. They would do all the billing for you on the back end. So hopefully that answers your question, my dear. All right. Okay, give it just another 30 seconds here if I don't see anything else pop in. But honestly, seriously, this is one of the easiest revenue tactics. You don't have to massively go out and market for those prescriptions, though once you start seeing the profit, you might decide to. You can just focus on getting your current patients moved over and kind of like passively accepting new patients. So if you're like, hey, we're really overwhelmed, my main extra help is out on maternity leave or something, like this is just a back end change. It's something you can sign up, get going, and then, in 3 months, you want to market it, fantastic. But at least you have this in place. You have a different option besides having to bill the PBM. So, all right, guys, I will let you all go. Thanks for joining me for this session. I believe Heather is hosting the next session. So look out for that in about 2 weeks. And obviously, I will send this out in the recording. And if you watch the recording, if you have any questions that I didn't answer here, feel free to send it back and send me any questions you have. You are most welcome, Joseph, and everybody else. So adios, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.